So Acts chapter 4 ends like this. All the believers were one in heart and mind. No one claimed any of his possessions as his own, but they shared everything they had. With great power, the apostles continued to testify to the resurrection of the Lord, and much grace was upon them all. There was no needy persons among them, for from time to time those who owned lands or houses sold them, brought the money from the sales and put it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to anyone as he had need. What an interesting thought. What an interesting model the early church gave us. Said that there were none among them who were needy, because those who had shared what they had. We learn about a man named Barnabas who had a piece of land, and he sold that land, and he brought the money and he put it at the feet of the apostles. And he told the apostles to give it to whoever needed it. The apostles, the leadership of the church in Jerusalem, held those funds, and then whoever was in need, they would look out for them and take care of them. This is the way of the early church. Well, Ananias and Sapphira are quite an interesting story. I don't think there's another story like this in the whole New Testament. They sold their land to a man, and he paid them for the land, and then they took that money and they hid part of the money for themselves. But then, knowing, with Sapphira's knowledge, Ananias took part of the money and he laid it at the feet of the apostles. Do you think that was wrong to just give part of the money? So Ananias tells Peter, "This is what we sold our land for. We want to give it to you to help those who are needy." Peter says, "How is it that Satan has filled your heart so much that you would lie to the Holy Spirit?" As these words came out of Peter's mouth, Ananias dropped dead in front of the apostles. Some young men came in and they covered his body, and then they carried him outside, and Ananias, that very day, was buried. Now Sapphira didn't know what had happened. And later that day, she comes to the place where the apostles are. And Peter asks her, were you paid such and such for this land? And Sapphira says, "Yes, that is the amount that we were paid for our land." Peter tells her, "The feet of the men who buried your husband are at the door. How could you agree to test the Spirit of God?" And with that, Sapphira dropped dead. And she too was carried out and buried that very day. What do you think about this story? How do you feel to hear of these two people who made a financial contribution, who gave of their means to the church, yet they dropped dead because they lied about what they were doing? As you can imagine, a great fear spread through all who heard this story of what had happened to Ananias and Sapphira when they lied to God. I pray that God will help you and I, as we think about this story, to evaluate our own promises and commitments and claims as we seek to live lives honest with ourselves and with the Holy Spirit. May God give you and I a clear vision of our own hearts as we try to live into the grace and holiness of a gracious God.